Meghan Markle is a horrific, terrible, no good, very bad boss. This is according to not the British tabloids, which Meghan Markle likes to rail against for their negative narrative of her. Oh, no, no, no. This is from the Hollywood Reporter. Yes, the industry where Meghan Markle is trying to make her mark, where her and Harry are trying to get through and becoming producers and movers and shakers. Well, apparently they've really started to take off the wrong people, namely their staff, because the Hollywood Reporter has why Hollywood keeps quitting on Harry and Meghan. And they've got this photoshopped picture. Harry saying, don't go, and Meghan saying, get out. This whole article is pretty much how Harry is a pretty charismatic, nice guy. But Meghan Markle is a dictator in heels. She throws tantrums. She belittles staff. She reduces grown men to tears, maybe even her own husband. We don't have too many details in this little Hollywood Reporter blurb because it's part of sort of a longer story, but it identifies a pattern of behavior with Meghan Markle. She is a terrible boss, according to every report we've seen. Yes, a couple people will come out from time to time and going, Meghan's great. But every report we have of her is that she is a terrible boss who abuses essentially her staff. In my opinion, that is what the Hollywood Reporter is alleging a couple years after the Times shared a similar report about Meghan Markle's abusive behavior towards her staff while she was still a working royal. We have a pattern of behavior and reports on now two separate continents of Duchess Difficult, as Meghan Markle was called. Although I think I prefer a dictator in heels. So we are going to go and explore this article today and what it means for Meghan, because it is bad news. I mean, it's one thing for the British tabloids to say it, but when a newspaper in your own industry is calling you a terrible boss and you don't have the talent to back it up, it's going to end disastrously for you. And that's where it's going, because all of her friends, all the people she's trying to cozy up with, they are all going to read this. So we are, again, like I said, going to go over the tidbits we get in this article. But if you guys haven't been to Royal News Network before, my name is Brittany. I provide compelling royal commentary. So if you guys want to hit that subscribe button, I would absolutely love it. We would enjoy having you back. All right, guys, this article. So I actually filmed a completely different video for today. And then as soon as I was done with this video, I got on Twitter because I spent a lot of time on Twitter. And I saw this article. It's like, oh my gosh, could not be more disastrous for the two of them. Really could not. Meghan Markle cannot get her brand off the ground. They've lost staff members. They keep losing staff members. Netflix is probably going to go out the door. Harry's Polo documentary is probably going to bomb. Like, everything is not turning up roses for them. And this article is like the nail in the coffin. And again, I love this because this just epitomizes Harry and Meghan. Apparently, we get into the article, people generally like him and they really kind of hate her. So it is sort of a terrible situation for anybody who gets involved in the Sussex camps. And this is so important because one of Meghan Markle's just drives and the narrative she's been trying to push is that all the negativity surrounding them is a result of the British press. It's all the British tabloids. It's all that. Like, none of it is true. The other bullying allegations she faced were just a smear campaign. But this is not a smear campaign. This is a pattern of behavior. She is not only getting reported on it in the UK by the Times of London, and other publications have picked up things as well. This is the Hollywood Reporter. Her own industry newspaper ran with this story even after contacting them. Why? Because they got the sources. They've got the sources. When you run with publications, and especially ones that could be considered defamatory, you want to make sure you cover your butt. And so if they are publishing this, they are almost 100% sure that there is nothing wrong with this, that they got somebody from their camp, and I'll tell you who I think it was. They have other reports too. They're not just going off of one person. The person they're talking to has told them to talk to other people who are reporting the same thing. And all this is coming together into this article, talking about why their staff keeps quitting. And this is, again, an issue for them. They are already struggling. And what you don't want is a high turnover of staff. And that this is happening indicates a real problem. And we'll see why. And this is called the Rambling Reporter. I don't really know what this is within it, but it's kind of like, seems like sort of like a weekly little newsletter. So let's get into this. looks like Harry and Meghan have done it again. They chewed up yet another American advisor. Says Josh Kettler, the Santa Barbara based consultant who'd been serving as chief of staff to the Duke and Duchess, although it was reportedly just Harry, so that's a bit confusing, reportedly resigned in August after just 3 months on the job. And just as a reminder, Josh Kettler, I think, is 100% the one behind this. I have no proof of that, but I think since he's the first one mentioned, he's the one talking to the press. And he feels comfortable enough, given what he witnessed. He probably even has receipts that he feels comfortable going to the press and risking NDAs because he's like, this behavior is not appropriate. It is abusing your staff, basically, I think, in my personal opinion. And so I feel like I'm justified to go to the press about this. And I don't think legally you have a recourse because you are the one who had the abysmal behavior. So he is going to the press. He's sharing his story and he pulled in others, I think, too. But also remember, he's the one who leaked that he got resigned first. And he did that so they could avoid saying it was a mutual decision. He got in front of the story, in front of them, because he's smarter than they are. So he's like, he knew they were going to try to spin it as this positive thing, saying essentially, which this guy is an incredibly accomplished business guy, but just basically telling them, the world, that he was a temp, that they just hired him to see how he'd do. And he didn't do so well, so they let him go. And he's like, no, we are not going to play that game. I resigned because you guys were awful to work for. And it is a two-person problem. Harry's problems, I think, are different than Meghan's, and we'll go into that. But he resigned, and he resigned for good reason, and he wants the world to know. Because what Meghan shows to the world and who she really is are two different things. And I think what we've seen over time is that Harry and Meghan's staff are sick of that. They're like, the public gets this sort of veneer of graciousness, of community, of thankfulness, of like generosity and all this stuff. And we get the hell in heels. No, no, no. We like people need to know who you are. And that's the thing, too. People don't like people who lie. And Meghan's entire facade, pretty much, according to this, the Times and other things, is mostly a lie. And the Sussex squad, they're not happy with this. I've had Sussex squad people like immediately in my comments on Twitter going, oh, no, no, no. What about the rest of the world? You're just negative about Harry and Meghan. I'm like, no, this publication should be supportive of them, but they're not because they have good sources that they're not. And the thing is, in Hollywood, you can get away with murder pretty much if you've got talent. They don't have any talent. They're not making anybody any money. And so when you're like that, they're less incentivized to protect you because they can't use you. You offer nothing. So they're like, yeah, go with it. Go with it. We'll go with it because they're not even high enough for people to be even scared of them. Everybody knew what Harvey Weinstein was doing in the industry. Pretty much everyone knew. I heard about it before it became a big story. It was on a royal forum because people wondered, they don't think there's any truth to this, how Cressida Bonus got a role in a Harvey Weinstein production. And they did the hint, hint, nudge, nudge. And so I'm like, oh, that's interesting. And then when the story broke, and I'm like, how did I hear about this on a royal forum? But yet nobody else in the entertainment industry knew. They're all acting shocked as if they didn't know. Then some of them come out and go, well, of course, we kind of all knew because they all knew. They all covered for it because he got them something. He got them roles. He got them money. Harry and Meghan don't do any of those things. So nobody's willing to protect them because they don't offer anything in return. So it says he has become the latest member of the ever-expanding Sussex Survivor Squad, as some former employees have taken to calling themselves. Before Kettler, there was Tanya Holness, who was their global press secretary until 2022, and Christine Weil Shermer, the one-time Pinterest communications director who quit as Harry and Meghan's PR head in 2021. Samantha Cohen, Markle's top aide and private secretary, departed the same year. Again, we have what they're establishing here is a pattern. This is a pattern of issues with very competent people who could get them far, but they've been stymied because Harry and Meghan are inept, talentless grifters, and Meghan Markle is apparently a horrifically awful boss, according to this article. And in my personal opinion, I guess I should say. Earlier, there was Keely Thomas Morgan, a Sunshine Stacks partner who started repping Meghan when she was still a commoner, well, as a TV star in Suits, adding Harry to her client roster when they became engaged and then helping them set up their own internal comms operation when the couple moved to California. Now, this is interesting because this is an additional bit. Sources tell Rambling Reporter, which is part of the Hollywood Reporter, that Morgan stopped repping them around 2020 because the Sussexes stopped paying Sunshine Sachs for its services, though the PR firm denies that was the case. I have a feeling it probably was. I think they probably stopped paying. Other members of the Survivors Club include Catherine St. Laurent, who lasted a year as the head of the Sussexes charity Archwell COO Mandana Diani, content chief Ben Browning, who got Harry and Meghan's documentary on Netflix before bolting to Film Nation. Probably it's like, whew, I'm done. And marketing chief Farrah Taylor. So we have 6 or 8 people who have left since they moved to California. And so people know what happened in the UK because the Times reported it. Now the Hollywood Reporter says this is what's happening in Hollywood right now with Harry and Meghan. We see the same pattern of people bolting, some from their previous royal life, some that they've hired now, usually lasting only a year or 2 at most. And so it goes on to say, why did they all leave? What explains the churn? And this is where I think Josh Kettler really steps in because he was a pretty accomplished business guy. I think he had a pretty high ranking role at Patagonia. And so he came in as their chief of staff. And I think they talk a pretty good game when you're in the interview process. And then he got there and he was like, oh, heck to the no. This is not going to work. This is not going to work because they're awful to work for. So here's what we have. Everyone's terrified of Meghan. Everyone's terrified of her. That's not a good boss. You should not be terrified of your boss. You should respect your boss, but you should not be terrified of them. And it goes on. Claims a source close to the couple. She belittles people. She doesn't take advice. They're both poor decision makers. They change their minds frequently. Harry is a very, very charming person. No airs at all. But he's very much an enabler, and she's just terrible. She's just terrible. She's terrible. She's an awful person to work for and seems like she's an awful person overall. And this isn't a surprise. This is the exact same pattern as we saw in the Times report. She belittles people. She does. Because she's vastly insecure. And so she has to belittle people, especially those below her, to feel powerful. And then she tries to chum up to people who are more powerful than she is. She's one of those type of people. You know them. You kind of remember them. Remember high school, middle school? Yeah, she has that emotional intelligence level. That's what she has. And she doesn't take advice, which we've seen. Like, I've dissected American Riviera Orchard like numerous times. I'm planning on doing like a whole little mini series for those of you. I'm going to try to keep them, I think, to like 10 minutes. For those of you who might be interested in how to start a brand, like, there's just some simple things that she's neglected. Like, why does she create the brand? What is the brand going to sell? Why do we need this particular brand? And it doesn't even make sense. Like, I still don't think any business person would go, yeah, launch the brand 6 months before you have a product. And don't forget to send your friends jars of jam that you're not going to sell and then not do anything for then the next 4 months. Like, that's idiotic. It's completely an idiotic plan. But that was Meghan's plan. We got indicators. I mean, even the basket, she gave them in the basket with the lemons, which was really lame. I'm sure that was her idea. And they're like, no, like, no. And again, it's all to the thing of like, what is the message that I have rich friends I can give jam to, as if I give jam to friends around Christmas time or something? Like, that was the level of the whole jam situation. And so 100%. I've said this before. She's not taking advice, and she doesn't. She doesn't take advice in anything, which is why they're failing, because she's really bad at this. People, if you hire the competent people, they can make up for your inadequacies. If you're not hiring competent people, that's not going to happen. And so that's totally collapsed. They're both poor decision makers, 100%. They're both terrible decision makers. And they've chosen projects that are not good for them. They apparently Meghan can't do 2 things at the same time. She can't do a podcast and her TV show at the same time. So we end up with this mess of like nothingness. And it's like, you could be building up to your show by building. I mean, it's just so simple. And she can't do it. It's insane. But they've made a lot of bad decisions regarding the Invictus Games, regarding their own businesses. Like, everything has stepped from one disaster into another, and they change their minds frequently, which I've said, it's like they seem to not have an overall vision of what they want to do. There's a joke from Veep which I like, where it's a former vice president, former president, and she's like on this circuit tour, and she keeps adding different charities like to her foundation. It's like that are not connected: adult literacy, AIDS, childhood obesity. Like she starts adding all these things, the something about democracy or whatever, and it's a joke, but like Meghan and Harry are really living it because they just jump from thing to thing to thing. No wonder everything's failing. They have no overall arching vision. The Parents Network is going to fail. Why? Because it's pointless. Like just for them, basically. It's a pointless little enterprise, and so it's not. But here's what's interesting too: is that Harry comes across as much better here. He's very very charming, no airs. He's great to get along with, but he enables her and she's just terrible. Now there's a couple reasons. This part to me has a couple of different interesting connotations. Number one, Josh could be secretly helping Harry set the foundation for a potential divorce by showcasing how terrible his wife is. Sorry, that could be it. And because he does come across overall much better here. Meghan is the one they're really targeting here. I think she is the one who has the abysmally bad behavior, because everything we've heard about Harry, yes, he got kind of bad around the wedding time and everything, but he's definitely, I don't think it's much more easier to get along with than Meghan is. Although he's a poor decision maker and he changes his mind frequently, he's the least charming and he's the least easy to like get along with for the most part. Still inept, but he has good qualities. She apparently has no good qualities. There is no single good quality in any of this for her. And I think the other thing is that Harry is generally a very nice guy. And so the staff feels a certain debt to him. But here's the other thing: he's very much an enabler. Why? A couple of reasons. Number one, he is also terrified of his wife. 100%. I think he's terrified of his wife. He's terrified of what she'll do. He's terrified that she'll get mad. And so he goes along with things, even though he doesn't want to, because he doesn't feel like he can say no. So he goes along with it because he's kind of stuck. The other possibility, of course, is that he's fully in love and wants to do everything she wants to do. The other thing is that he is aware of her inadequacies, but he really doesn't know how to manage her. So he just goes along with everything. And he's not really terrified of her. It's just that he doesn't really want to deal with the tension. That could be the other thing. But she is the problem. She 100% is the problem. He's the problem because he really doesn't know what he's doing, and he really has no clue what he wants to do. I think that's overall Harry's problem. Meghan's problem is that she is not only terrible at what she's trying to do, but she's also just a terrible person. Like I said, and she's just terrible. Terrible. And it goes on. So it says in 2018, Markle's treatment of two royal aides prompted Buckingham Palace to investigate the then Duchess, she's not a princess, for bullying behavior, though the results, although I like how they said then princess. Clever. Though the results of the inquiry were never released, Markle denounced the effort as a calculated smear campaign. She did. Because it's a British press who are the worst. But there's more. But some of the couple's stateside staff members also reserve special bile for Markle, whose reported penchant for noisy tantrums and angry 5 a.m. emails has earned her the in-house moniker Duchess Difficult. Now that started in the UK, but apparently they still use it in the stateside as well. And noisy tantrums and angry 5 a.m. emails. So noisy tantrums, let's take that first. Now, I used to say that I didn't really think Meghan Markle was a screamer, because she seems to me to come across as somebody who can be absolutely nice to you while totally tearing you down as a human being. But this raises some interesting things. So number one, she might be a screamer or a yeller at her staff. 100% that's what she might be. And I know people joke that she's throwing plates or something, but she must be doing something to make noise. So I don't know if it's plates. I don't know if it's slamming doors. I don't know if it's throwing things off people's desks. And what's interesting too is this tantrum throwing goes along with what we heard in Australia, that she threw a glass of tea at someone. So again, we have like another account where that could essentially be the case. I'm just being careful here for legal reasons, but like there's a pattern of behavior that's completely unacceptable. And angry 5 a.m. emails. Now, I don't behoove somebody who wants to get a head start on the day. I'm kind of a lazy morning person. I'm a bit of a night owl. So I'm not as up on things as I should be, 100%. But I think what's happening here is, and what would really annoy me is that she's sending emails at 5 a.m. and expecting a response at 5:15 a.m. It's like, well, I'm not supposed to be in the office till 8 a.m. Yes, there are some jobs where you are paid basically salary, and so they can work you out of hours without paying you more. But unless there's a good reason, and I've worked in places where there are definite emergency situations that need to be dealt with immediately. I know people who have worked 18-hour days in particular situations, sometimes longer, for a particular crisis. That does happen. But I think what Meghan Markle does is she sends emails at 5 a.m., expects a response at 5:15, and then screaming at you via email at 5:30 for not getting to her fast enough. That's my personal opinion. I don't actually know. If I had a boss who was a really early bird and sent me emails at 5 a.m., but didn't really expect me to do anything until 9, I would be okay with that because, hey, you get up early, that's totally fine. But it's expecting somebody to else to so much work around your schedule that she's sending off angry emails first thing in the morning. And me as a staff member, especially, like, if I got that email super early, that would, like, wreck the rest of my day, and she 100% knows that. That would put me off the rest of my day. I'd feel terrible. I'm, like, stressed because my boss is mad at me, and it just compounds throughout the day. So she's not somebody who has any respect for anybody else, because, again, you can send emails at 5 AM and be perfectly fine as a boss with somebody responding once they get into the office unless it's an emergency. But she's sending emails at 5 a.m. that are not emergencies and expecting people to respond by 5:15. That's a problem. That's terrible management. And so Dutch is difficult, not a surprise. And then she's absolutely relentless. Again, we have seen this before, heard this before. When she has a bee in her bonnet, when she has an idea, she will drive it home. And I would imagine, if she is that way with certain things, she's that way with her staff too. She's relentless. So she has you in her sights, and we've heard this again from the Buckingham Palace report from Valentine Lowe, that she'll just go after you until you're completely belittled and in a puddle on the floor. Because again, she has zero respect for the people who work for her. She doesn't, I don't think, in my opinion. And so she marches around like a dictator in heels, fuming and barking orders. And so I'm sure she comes in, she'll throw things on the desk, ask, "Why didn't you do X?" "Well, you told me not to do X, but you needed to do X." So here's the other thing. So Harry and Meghan can't make good decisions, especially her, apparently. She's not really a good decision maker. She makes the wrong decision every single time. So this is probably what happens to employee, because they hire competent people because competent people are like, "Hey, they're high profile people. This will help my career. I can help them," yada, yada, yada. So Meghan Markle wants to go to the godmother's bookstore and speak at the evening before the anniversary of the Queen's death. And the team is like, you might not want to do that. That might not play super well. Maybe like go a different day or something. And Megan's like, no, no, I want to go that day. So she goes. And then the headlines are bad. And then she comes in, "Why didn't you prevent those headlines?" It's like, "But we told you but I don't care what you think. You should have prevented that. You should have prevented me from doing the thing I wanted to do and did anyways, despite your piece of advice to me." Like, that's the kind of person she is. So she yells at you if you get it wrong. She yells at you if you get it right. And she'll yell at you if you give her advice different than what she wants to do. She does her thing anyways, and then it gets blowback. She'll still yell at you. So no matter what you do, you're gonna be yelled at. Like, that is hell. Like, that is awful. Like, nobody wants to work with that. And she's fuming and barking orders. And so she's just yelling at you, demanding things. And she's like, I've watched her reduce grown men to tears, because she's the one of those people too who knows really how to turn the screws to you and knows how to just slap people down a peg. And not in a good way. Like, sometimes we all need to be humbled a bit. No, no, no. She takes, I think, great pleasure in making people feel terrible about themselves. The Sussex Squad is very much the same way. They go along the same path. It's very much, it's very much a middle school, high school mean girl. That is Meghan Markle's emotional intelligence level. I've said that before. Seems like it's incredibly true. And she doesn't like to be told no, I'm sure. And again, they've had a lot of bad headlines, and I'm sure she yells at her staff every single time, but they're like, "We told you not to go to Colombia." "But the vice president invited me." It's like, well, it might play bad with the press, but I wanted to go. So we went. They were going to worship me, and I need to be worshiped. I need a microphone. Like, she's one of those kind of people. And just reducing grown men to tears. It's like, why? Well, and that's the thing too. If she's reducing other grown men to tears, I bet you she's done the same to her husband. Her husband is not immune from any of this. He enables her in part, and I gave you a couple ways I think he goes with the enabling, but I think he enables her in part because if he doesn't, he gets it worse at home. If somebody's doing this to their staff, they are doing it at home. Like most likely 100% they are doing this at home. Maybe worse at home. I don't know, but this is a type of pattern of behavior that definitely exists, and it's very bad for her in the industry. Very, very bad for her. And this is so key. The unsparing portrait of her is in marked contrast with the kinder, gentler image Markle has been painting of herself. This is the thing. People don't like liars. And Josh Kettler, if he is the one who leaked it, going, I spent 3 months there and she was a dictator in heels. She was awful to work with. And yet she's parading herself as around as this very generous, lovely, gentle, kind, caring woman. And he's like, she's not. She's not that at all. And so they want to get the truth out there. That's the thing. So somebody in the Twitter comments said, well, why don't we hear stories about Camilla and Catherine? It's like, because there's not stories to tell. Even in royal spheres, if somebody is really difficult to work for, it comes out in the press one way or another. Even non-disclosure agreements, at some point, people will become aware of it. Male reporters said they could see, I think it was the head of security for Meghan Markle at the market in Fiji, crying in the back of a car. Like, the press not only heard about it, they saw it. Like, you can't totally ignore that. So it's just right there. And they're all thinking to themselves, the staff members going, she's doing this image and it's not true. And to me, that would annoy me too. It's like, it's not true. Say what you want, do what you want, but it's not true. When you're not being truthful, people don't like that. And they are more than willing to tattle on you because you've treated them terribly. And Meghan Markle has treated all of her staff terribly, and it is coming back to bite her. Not once, not twice, but a couple of times now. All she has to do is be nice to these people, but apparently she can't do that. And she should be a little bit more honest with who she is. And again, I will say in the Hollywood industry, some of this stuff would fly if she had talent. Hollywood is more than willing to overlook a lot of things if that person makes some money. If that person has talent. Meghan Markle doesn't have talent. She's difficult to work for and doesn't have the talent to back it up. You can be difficult to work for in the entertainment industry, but you have to have a buttload of talent with you. If you had that, people are somewhat more willing to overlook the bad behavior. It still comes out. But if they get to be next to somebody who's very talented and they maybe make great decisions and they're very innovative and stuff like that, people gravitate towards that. But if you have somebody who not only is terrible to you, but completely inept, not taking any advice, not learning a single lesson. It's kind of like there's like a thing with Hades or something where it's the guy who rolls the ball up the hill every day. He's like tortured by doing this, rolling the ball up the hill every day, only to almost reach the precipice and have it roll back down. That is essentially what Meghan Markle does to these people. And these people are not like lower peons. They're highly, highly in demand people in their space. And they're like, no, we don't have to deal with this. I'm resigning. And that's what Josh Kettler did. And he made sure to let Richard Eden know, a British publication, that, hey, I've resigned. I didn't part mutually, or that I was there as a highly sought after consultant, just there on a temporary basis to see how the fit is. That's not my role. That's like something you do for like lower ranking employees that they want to test the waters out for like 90 days or something. He's like, no, that's not what I did. I worked there for 3 months. It was hell. I am done. And now I think he is, although I'm sure other people are contributing to this as well, sharing what's truly going on behind the scenes. Because he's like, the British papers were right. And he wants the rest of the industry to know it. So it says, in recent years, she's not a former princess, she's a former working royal, has become an ardent admirer of best-selling Texas self-help author Brene Brown, who urges readers to cultivate gratitude and joy in their lives. While touring Colombia with her husband last month, Markle said her new attitude of gratitude had led her to a chapter of joy. If you're going to be grateful for your life, you have to be grateful for all aspects of it. I wonder if Meghan Markle is grateful this evening. And in a recent episode of our Archetypes podcast, which I thought was weird that they mentioned recent because it's really old unless a new episode has come out or something, Meghan spoke about the challenges she has faced asserting herself and overcoming her natural reticence in professional situations. I find myself cowering and tiptoeing into a room. And the thing I find most embarrassing, when you're saying a sentence and the intonation goes up, it's like a question. And you're like, oh my goodness, stop, like whispering and tiptoeing around it. Just say what it is that you need. You're allowed to set a boundary. You're allowed to be clear. It doesn't make you demanding. It doesn't make you difficult. It makes you clear. And they're showing this contrast going, no, she doesn't have any issues at all being clear, upfront, demanding, difficult, all these sorts of things. And yes, I do remember this now. The difficult line was from a previous podcast. She is difficult. She is 100% difficult. And you can be difficult sometimes and be easy up. There's times the thing is, I don't think there's any boundary. What we heard according to Valentine Lowe in the Courtier's book is that when it came to Charles, he would have some outbursts of anger occasionally from time to time, but then he would cool down for a bit and immediately apologize. Meghan doesn't apologize. And so she's never endears herself to her staff. So they have no reason to protect her because they don't like her. They have like bile for her. They hate her and they kind of like him, but they hate her. And this again is disastrous for her. Cannot tell you again how important this is. Harry and Meghan's current spokesperson, which is kind of funny because as if they're saying, oh, well, it might change pretty soon, declined to comment. So they declined to comment. So what this means is that they wrote out this whole article, wrote out the allegations and sent it to Harry and Meghan's team. It's like, would you like to respond? And Harry and Meghan's team is like, no, because in part they know it's true. And in part they don't really have any recourse. They don't. They don't. This is a pattern of behavior. And unfortunately for Meghan Markle, the standards of defamation in the United States are much higher than in the UK. So in defamation, you really truly have to prove that what somebody has said about you is impacting your livelihood. And that is not the case with Harry and Meghan. Now, it could, but if it's true, if they did treat their staff terribly, and the Hollywood Reporter has receipts from this guy sharing this, Harry and Meghan they don't have a response. They have no response. Like, what can they say? Well, it's wrong. But you guys have said that before. You've said that before, and it clearly wasn't true because you're still doing the same thing now that you were like 5, 6 years ago. This is a pattern of behavior, a pattern of abysmal behavior, abhorrent behavior. You are subjecting your staff members to. And the staff members are coming to the conclusion of like, no, I don't have any reason to protect you. Why are you asking me to help you? I don't want to help you. You haven't helped me. You've been awful to me. So I did just want to share something else here real quick. And I thought this was kind of funny because this hat is gigantic. So Meghan and Harry knew this story was coming out. So they immediately go to people and share this absolute non-story and pictures with them. So here's what I think happened, and this is just my theory. So these pictures were taken by Backgrid, exclusively given to people. This is Meghan visiting that silly bookstore. This is what I think happened. Meghan set up the paparazzi shots and had custody of the pictures. So she set up the photographer, had him take the pictures. Maybe even Harry was over there taking the pictures of her. And she knew this story was coming out. And so she wanted to get ahead of it, or maybe, okay, I don't think they found out about it a week ago, probably just a day ago, but they may have been sitting on these pictures. And so they're thinking to themselves, well, maybe it's good to show these pictures now. Maybe we can get a little kickback from it. People can remember, oh, look, I'm fashionable. Oh, look, I live in Montecito. Oh, look, I have this new case. Like they had to show off this case. Take what you need. And so they had to show this like card holder thing. She's wearing her evil eye bracelet, her Justin Clo necklace, and she's trying to like portray this image of a look. I'm just this housewife. I'm just this housewife. I mean, she's almost basically looking at the camera here. You can like see her eyes, or at least her one of her eyes. She's kind of directly looking at the camera, and she has this ridiculous hat on. I'm sorry, it reminded me, and as somebody mentioned it because I couldn't remember where I saw it from. It reminds me of an episode of Friends. Rachel Green wore this huge hat. Go ahead and take a watch of this little clip here.
Well, excuse me, my fashion-impaired friends. I am here to tell you that hats are back. And this time they've ganged up and formed one giant super hat.
And I like this hat you can see from space. It's ridiculously huge. Nobody wears this. And here's what's really silly. Meghan Markle is shielding her face from the sun, and yet she'll also put a bunch of bronzer on to make her face look darker. Like, you could just get a tan, you know? Like, okay. Anyways, but this is almost, and there's another joke from Veep, which I like. It's like, it's Washington types and they're meeting like offsite and they're doing this kind of clandestine meeting. And the person setting up gives this ridiculous name to the front desk. And one of the characters quips, "What was Vladimir pay attention to myself taken?" And I love that because I feel like that's with Meghan. It's like subtle. How is this subtle to wear this gigantic hat? I feel like this thing, again, you could see it from space. It's huge. It's attention grabbing. If I saw somebody wearing a hat like that, I'd be going, that's like super duper odd. That's like really weird. Like if you're not at a beach or something, it's like looks like she's out and about. She'd be less conspicuous not wearing the hat. And she's done this before shopping, wearing this huge hat. I'm like, you draw more attention. It's like Vladimir, draw attention to myself. Like you're screaming, you want the fat. And then you're like flashing your little keychain thing here, hoping people buy it. Because remember, her whole thing now is merching. And so I think she knew the story was coming out and she was kind of desperate to do something to maybe take a little bit of the fuss out. But this ain't going to work. And let's see. Let's go back a page here real quick. But People magazine, oh, they're towing the line. We don't have a single article out yet about the Hollywood Reporter article. Not a surprise. But this is bad. It's basically a blaring bullhorn to the whole industry going, she is terrible. She is awful. She belittles people. And not to mention the fact that they all know as well, Harry and Meghan don't have the talent to really be in the industry. They really don't. And so you have this situation where this will essentially cost Harry and Meghan a lot. And all she had to do was be nice to people. That's all she had to do. But she'll destroy her own livelihood because she's so desperate to be seen as this duchess or something. And she's just so demanding. I mean, she was like this before. Remember, she wanted like a Dior robe and a whole bunch of things at this hotel in Canada. And they were like, no. And then she's like, I need a side interest because people will recognize me. And they're like, nobody recognizes you. I mean, she's still very convinced that people will be constantly recognizing her. I swear, Meghan, if you go out without that hat, nobody would probably pay all that much attention to you, to be honest, especially if you're wearing shades and you're not drawing attention to yourself. You may go pretty inconspicuously, but she doesn't. She's desperate, desperate, desperate to be seen as this Hollywood mover and shaker. And unfortunately, the Hollywood Reporter just killed that notion. I don't know if Meghan Markle can recover from this. They need a massive, massive hit, either with Polo or American Riviera Orchard. I don't have high hopes for either. I'm not even sure American Riviera Orchard at this point will even get off the ground by Christmas. And again, that is the kiss of death to Meghan Markle's career. And this is a great lesson for Meghan as well. You can participate in that behavior for a certain period of time, but don't expect any of your staff members to want to protect you, help you in anything like that. As soon as the blood is in the water, they'll pounce. And the Hollywood industry is looking to pounce as well. And Netflix could use this as another get out of Sussex relationship jail card because they're like, well, she's terrible to work for. They haven't given us much. And there's not that much talent to pull from. They just don't have the talent for this industry. And that is 100% difficult to ignore, not to mention the fact they're not good managers. They're not good decision makers. And this will all sink them. It is sinking them right now. So we shall see how all this plays out. But guys, let me know what you think of this latest report. I'd love to get your thoughts. Thank you so much for watching, and I shall see you very, very soon. Bye.